I'm going to call this meeting of the East Hampton City Council Ordinance Subcommittee to order, February 22nd, 2017, 6 p.m. All of us are here. So we just have a couple of things to do before we get into the meat of why all of you are here. And the first of those things is the approval of minutes from January 25th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those?
They could make a motion to approve them.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Is there anyone here for public speak time on anything other than the item that we are going to be looking at tonight, which primarily is going to be the consideration of a sanctuary city designation for East Hampton? Didn't think so. Okay, so let me set a couple ground rules before we get started here. I like to say we live in a civilized society, so let's keep it that way. And part of that is respecting that we all have our own opinions. However, being able to have those opinions and respect other people's opinions as well is important, and be able to do that in a respectful way. I think one of the things I've learned from my 12 years on the City Council is that it's important to be able to have civil discourse and appropriate dialogue with each other, as we're all neighbors, we're all friends. And even if it gets heated and passionate, we are still neighbors. And I think that's important. We're still East Hampton citizens. And we can't lose sight of that, number one. And I think that for us to be able to disagree and agree to disagree and shake hands and walk away, that was one of the biggest takeaways I've gotten from being on City Council. Because I don't always agree with people, but I always respectfully agree to disagree and shake hands and walk away. So that being said, tonight for our deliberations, I said at the last meeting that I was not going to necessarily open it up to full-scale discussion. I think that it is important for people to be able to be heard. And this is an appropriate expression of our democratic process. So I do want people to be able to speak to this issue. And I do have some guidelines for that. So the first is that I'm going to ask that you keep it to 3 minutes. At 3 minutes, I will hit the gavel. Please don't make me keep gaveling you. It's embarrassing for both of us. I'm going to ask you to state your name for the record. I'm going to ask you to tell us your address for the record. Please address the subcommittee. And when you address the subcommittee, please don't address one of us in particular. Let's keep it general. When we start attacking people or saying you, it makes it uncomfortable for all of us, and it's not necessarily appropriate. I think all of us here are here to do the best by East Hampton as we can, and we don't deserve to be attacked. Neither do you. And so I'm going to ask you to extend that same courtesy, to not pinpoint people out of the crowd and say, you said this, you said that. Let's keep it general. If we keep our remarks general, that will keep it civil. Please don't heckle or boo. If you have a point that has already been stated, maybe multiple times, maybe the last meeting, which we were here for 3 hours, maybe I can guarantee you that we listened. So if you have something new to add, that'd be great. We will stay on topic, and that's important because we are not deliberating national immigration policy at this meeting. That is not the point of this meeting. The point of this meeting is to talk about East Hampton and whether what is proposed makes sense for East Hampton. So getting into broader arguments about immigration are not necessarily germane to this conversation. So I think that as we move forward, if we follow those things, we should have a really nice meeting and walk away happy. And one other thing I did want to add before we get started is the mayor did want to be here, and she wanted to express her disappointment that she couldn't be here, but she is at a Purple Heart ceremony tonight, and that is something that she was committed to, and I respect her for doing that. One last thing, and this is just came into my head from last time. If you are in the way back and you're having trouble hearing, there is no amplification system here other than our vocal cords. So when you get up to speak, please speak so everybody can hear you. And if you can't hear, please don't yell at people that you can't hear them. Move closer. I guarantee that nobody will bite, and if you need to pull up to the side, there's 3 empty seats in the front row. There's a couple empty seats in between, so feel free just to squeeze in. JP.
I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
Setting the tone. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
I just wanted to also ask just a point of clarification, because I did hear some comments at after the previous meeting, and that was we dealt with heckling and we dealt with being civil with one another. Sometimes we just feel like somebody said something and we just have to give a little applause. How do you feel about that? Do we set a ground rule on that?
I think-
Either yes or no, and then everybody will understand where we're at.
Okay, so
If we don't do it, we can get through this quicker. If we do, we can show our support.
and I think that as people express their appreciation or their applause are great. I feel like last meeting I gavelled one round of applause, and it was for a very pointed reason. It was because that round of applause was based off of what I felt was a personal attack on a counselor, and I didn't find it to be appropriate. So I will not gavel anybody's applause unless I find it to be, in response to something that it was not appropriate within the confines of this meeting.
A short applause.
Short applause.
Yeah,
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
Short applause.
Okay. I'm planning to.
Yeah, I want to say something, or you wanted me to wait?
Well, I think maybe we can, give an update on, what's going on and maybe go from there. So, update. So at the last meeting, one of the things that we had talked about was there's a couple avenues looking at sanctuary city status or not sanctuary city status. One of those was through Ordinance, which is we are the Ordinance subcommittee, so that would be with us. And that's what we were charged with, to look at an ordinance. When we did not receive any language when we were deliberating this, and we did do some research to find if other communities had done this through ordinance. The majority of communities had done this through executive order, which means the mayor is the one that puts the sanctuary city status forward. That being said, we still have. Oh, yeah, would you like to?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Do you mind if I just say what I
Go
needed
ahead.
to say?
You go ahead.
I appreciate everyone being here tonight. My name is Tamara Smith. I'm one of the city councilors. And I think I probably have the same cold that most of East Hampton has right now. Probably gave it to half of you. I wanted to say a few things before we go into another round of exchanges here. Right before the last city council meeting, prior to that meeting, another role that I play in the city council is that I'm the appointment subcommittee chair. And our subcommittee had to interview the police chief at that time. We talked at length about community policing during that meeting, and he was very forthcoming with how the police of East Hampton dealt with community policing and several of the options that the police had already used. And I think that's really important to mention here because historically speaking, sanctuary cities were not a polarizing issue as they've become during this whole debate. The reason that I signed on to co-sponsor this is because I was hearing these conversations taking place in the community. And I was hearing many, many untruths about what sanctuary cities were and what sanctuary cities were not, filtering through what you would say the rumor mill of living in a small city. I signed on to co-sponsor this bill because of my understanding of what sanctuary cities mean from a policing perspective, and to make sure that we had an opportunity as a community to A, have the language that is appropriate when we're talking about that, and B, have an opportunity for our police chief to be open and transparent with us about what his community practices currently are. And that's important because obviously we have a very polarized room. And when we first came together, when I first saw this coming out in our community and I first saw the notion of sanctuary cities hitting my desk, being requested from city residents, my first concern was who would become immediately vulnerable as a result of this conversation. That still remains very much a concern for me, more so than in the past. And I want to bring a couple things about the history of sanctuary cities and how East Hampton relates to this, because it's very pertinent to this conversation. Historically speaking, sanctuary cities have been much larger than East Hampton, and that's been deliberate. There is a large ethnic enclave within larger cities to create more of an insulation for people who are living in the city as an immigrant, regardless of whether or not they're documented. B, in a larger city, the infrastructure already exists of community members working with advocacy groups for several marginalized members. This is very important as we're considering this for the city of East Hampton, because East Hampton is not a large city. It's one of the smallest cities that you could have. And as I mentioned during the last city council meeting, the change in the population in East Hampton has been very rapid, and it has happened within the last 10 years. This is a natural process of having a relatively older population in East Hampton and having new families move into the area. And anytime that happens, there is going to be a lot of unrest within a community. Throw a contentious election into the middle of that, and we have a powder keg here. And again, the reason that I signed on to this is not to more fully polarize our community. And I had someone at the last meeting ask me if I was finding entertainment out of this, if I was happy with myself for having the town get this divided. No, not at all. But it is my responsibility, as it is the responsibility of the rest of the city council, to be able to engage in these open discussions in one of the only venues of the city that this is allowed to happen in. I can appreciate that a lot of people after the election are suddenly really feeling not at ease with the election. And there are other people who are feeling very happy with the election. Regardless of which way you stand on that, we are entering a time in civic society where we're having a lot more people become a lot more participatory in government. And having you all in this room is certainly an example of that. One of the biggest fears that I had when I first heard the term sanctuary city being used for East Hampton, and what remains one of my biggest fears, is the targeting that can have for a very small proportion of residents in East Hampton. The truth is, perhaps you do know someone who's undocumented in East Hampton, and perhaps you have met them. Much more likely, you just have seen someone that perhaps you think may be an undocumented immigrant. And the fear that has caused for anyone who cannot pass as a non-immigrant person in East Hampton has been confounded. At the same time, when we're looking at the national standpoint and we're looking at the threats that President Trump has brought forth, I can also understand the fear that the other side of this debate has. But what is so heartbreaking to me as a parent raising children in East Hampton is that this is not a win or lose situation. For one side to stand and say that they have more of a right to feeling safe in East Hampton than the other side is only going to further divide our community. And the truth is that this was, I know many of the people who came forth with this as a consideration for city council. But what was missing in the presentation of this was that beginning bottom-up community building of support that would make people who needed that type of sanctuary status feel a part of a community. Without having any of those functions in place, we are putting very vulnerable people at higher risk within our city. And the longer that this goes on, as we continue to debate until what's the end point of this game. Either we're going to have people leaving town because of fear, or we're going to have people leaving town because of resentment. Neither of those situations are a good environment for the children of East Hampton to be growing up in. At this point, I really seem to be losing my voice, which is bad because I have to teach tomorrow. But at this point, I think we need to step back as a community and recognize that the fastest action is not always the most prudent action. And while I can appreciate that sanctuary city is supposed to be protective of a population, to debate whether or not that population has a right to exist in East Hampton, or that anybody who may be interpreted as that population exists in East Hampton, is a fruitless conversation. So I want to entertain a motion to withdraw the proposal for a sanctuary city, because I do not feel that this is a role that the city council should be taking up. In any other city that we've seen, the city council is supportive of a sanctuary city, not demanding of a sanctuary city. And when we look at the laws with a mayor strong and a police chief strong city, we also face legalities there that nobody who would have said, I'm concerned for everyone in my city, would be thinking along those terms. Okay, let me try a cough drop. This is ridiculous.
Should have got you a water.
Yeah, sorry.
You gotta give it time to hit your throat, you know.
Yeah.
You know. Oh, yeah. My mom used to say never pass a drinking fountain without taking a sip of water. And I should have followed her advice. Okay, so what I was saying, this is an excellent opportunity for people who are wanting a more welcoming community, who are really feeling that, you know, they haven't had to really face these issues, but they want to do more. This is a great time to community organize and start building some of those nets that will make the people that you're concerned about feel safe in East Hampton. And I mean you no disrespect, but from starting from the top and then going down to create a law with none of those supports in place, thank you. It's nice someone's. This is not an easy position to be in, as you can imagine. So, I know that all of you have very strong opinions on where you stand. That's part of American society. We have values. They don't always coincide, but having one value does not negate the ability for someone to have another value. I'd really love to see our city start to heal from this rift. I would love to see people who are really wanting to build more of a welcoming community for people to do that at a community level. I would like the people who are fearing that they are going to lose their stake in the city because of the term sanctuary city to also feel less fear if we withdraw that statement. I believe this is a starting point, not an end point. This is a great opportunity. The police chief has been present at all of these meetings. He certainly has a good understanding of where the fears in East Hampton are right now. And I think this is an excellent opportunity as a council to start working to build up more liaisons with the police community so that every person within East Hampton has an equal feeling of safety and comfort and an equal opportunity to access the police that we all share as this community. So based on that, I would like to make the motion to withdraw the proposal.
Before we make a second, I think it might be, because once we second it, then we can't have discussion
Yep,
from
I can appreciate that.
the broader community. So I think I'll have you reintroduce that, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to open it up for people to be able to comment. And I just want to say thank you for saying that and struggling through with your voice. And I believe that the best way forward is a cooperative way forward, and I think I want to thank Chief Alberti for communicating with us and being upfront, and I think that the only way for us to move forward is cooperatively with the police and hopefully with the mayor's office, and I would like to see the council reaffirm our position on what we feel makes East Hampton a welcoming place, and reaffirm the fact that we did pass an anti-discrimination ordinance, and we strongly stand by that. And I would also like to see us go further. So, but that being said, do you have anything you want to add before we open it up, JP?
Well, I was totally taken aback by your comments, and I understand, and I think you've expressed yourself very well. I don't know if anyone else in the audience may feel the same way, that this comes as a surprise. We're, of course, not allowed to talk with one another to discuss things.
Sorry.
I've been studying this matter for 2 months, day and night, because this is very important to any community if we are to move forward. I think I really like hearing about moving forward in a positive fashion that is more together. I know we're not, nor other communities that have taken a stance. We're not Northampton, we're not Holyoke, we're not Springfield, we're not Chicago, we're not Los Angeles or New York. The big cities, and in some ways, aside from all the other issues, one of the issues is the financial position of a big city to take on an administration, because this does have something to do with immigration, and it does have something to do with national policies, I believe. So the big cities have a staff of attorneys, 50, 30, 40 attorneys who can just get on it and work their position. They also have a budget, and I was taken a little bit by surprise when I looked at what's happening, what I understand, in New York City, where the mayor is setting aside $250 million just in case the federal government decides to withhold funds. Now, there may or may not be the ability to hold funds, but we certainly don't have $250,000, I think, to set aside funds unless.
$250 million.
Right, but that $250 million is New York's. For us, from our perspective, the figure of $1.9 million in federal funds was the one that was bandied about that the city gets or got last year. We can't raise $250,000 unless we slash the heck out of our current budget to prepare for what might come down should we move forward, and that's important. And I know some people would say, well, maybe we can craft something that doesn't deal with against any policies of the federal government, so there would be no sanctions, let's say. But then we'd have to probably get an opinion from somebody, an attorney, from our legal staff to talk to us about that. Maybe this is a good time to build the infrastructure that's needed to protect ourselves and those who would feel vulnerable in the community. I agree with you on that. And I agree the top-down really isn't the best way to make ordinances. I may have more to say later.
Fair enough.
For now, I leave it to...
So let me remind everybody, 3 minutes, then there will be a gavel. State your name and address for the record. And please, when you refer to people, please speak in generalities. Generalities.
Good.
Can't talk. So if anybody would like to come up, then.
I just have a point of order, Salem.
Point
Sure.
of order.
What are we now speaking to? Are we speaking to the motion?
You can speak to whatever you would like, because there's no motion on the table yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought there was.
No, I asked for.
Until it's seconded?
I
The
asked.
motion was withdrawn, I believe.
Yeah, I asked for it to not be seconded so we could open it up to the public. Because once a motion is seconded, then we can deliberate, but we can't get input from.
You might want to withdraw the motion.
I withdraw the motion.
Okay.
Okay, just before my time starts, just to get a brief summary. Most ordinances, this isn't done usually by ordinance, it's done by executive order. The mayor couldn't make it the February 8th meeting. I'm guessing we moved it to a day where...
No, I couldn't make the
you couldn't
February
make
8th.
it. Okay.
Mm.
All right, name and address before you get started there.
My name is Matt Scarron. I live on Campbell Drive. I've got a brief statement. I'll try to get through it quickly and loudly. If I raise my voice, it's not at you. It's so since we're talking about withdrawing the notion, I'm going to address this to the mayor, apparently. The subject of illegal immigration is a tough one. There are people in the world that have taken advantage of others for time immemorial. Some do it violently, others do it in peaceful but still unethical ways. The victims of these transgressions often have few options. Stay in place as the victim, stay in place and fight for their rights, or to travel to a place with a promise of more. Sometimes fate steps in and flips this paradigm on its head. The period of American slavery comes to mind. People ripped away from their homes and loved ones in order to provide cheap labor outside the morality of the law. And this practice came to the 13 colonies via Massachusetts, who turned it into a for-profit proposition, supplying slaves to the other colonies. Fortunately, although it took time, slavery was abolished not only by proclamation, but through the direct actions of citizens of Massachusetts. One way to help the resistance was the Underground Railroad. Fugitives, a term for escaped people of color, were assisted by fugitive assistants, which designated any person, north or south, who willingly helped fugitives in any way. They transported them by boat, by wagons, by foot, in the cover of darkness, sheltered them in homes or outbuildings, providing them with food, clothing, medical aid, or even employment. In many ways, the people in this room are part of the same resistance. It can be argued that what some call illegal immigrants are really the new slave class of the Americas. Individuals and families are brought here in order to fill the needs that many Americans are not capable or willing of dealing with. The ungracious, dirty, icky, poor-paying jobs that are in the background: fruit picker, janitor, dishwasher, out of sight, out of mind, off the books, bad pay, zero benefits. Sounds like slavery, doesn't it? I'm having one problem with this analogy, and I hope that the selectmen, who, since I can't address them, can help with this since they're wired. Could you Google homes for the Underground Railroad? I tried and tried, but I just can't find any pictures of the Underground Railroad homes, sites, or trails with 10-foot signs proclaiming that fugitives are sheltered here. I'll let that sink in for a second. I can't wrap my way around why these people weren't proud of their resistant movement. It's not like the government was going to shut them down. How could they? Mail traveled by horse. Troops traveled by sailboat. There was no internet and no social media that could provide the government with the location of every town and city and family and individual helping these fugitives under the cover of darkness in a keystroke. However, there was character strength that was strong in the original 13 colonies. Good old-fashioned common sense, hence the use of codes and signals and under the cover of darkness parts of the railroad. I would like to also broach the subject of money. I stood before you at the last gathering we had and told the room that the president was going to come after the federal subsidies, as that's what they really are. I even laid out specific statutes and the politicians responsible for them. I was followed by many residents of East Hampton and some non-residents who were very emotionally driven, and I applaud the participation, even if every selectman, if every meeting was met with the same passion. That would be awesome for East Hampton, but I digress. On the subject, and I appreciate your gavel, I am almost done. On the subject of money, it has come to my attention out of the Northampton Mayor's office that East Hampton is down to approximately $2 million. JP is 1.9. The amount of subsidies received last year alone are close to that amount. Our selectmen just approved the buying of a $500,000 lottery ticket in the hopes that we will be selected for another subsidy for the repair of Union Street. The next project requiring more millions of subsidies is the new K-8 building. Regardless of them being state or federally funded, it is an unnecessary complication. I am here to remind you that I was correct in my assessment the last time I spoke, and I fear that I will be correct this time. President Trump is not only going to stop with just law enforcement subsidies if we continue out in the open, he will take it all regardless of constitutionality. How is he going to do this? They will just hold the funds until the case makes it to the Supreme Court, and they will sit on it. And it may take, and I'm going to abbreviate now, it may take several years for us to get that money back. And all of us have friends, neighbors, senior citizens, and little children that are going to be affected by this. Ask Mayor Morse over in Holyoke. They have fire trucks that can't leave the buildings because they don't have enough money. And they just made themselves a sanctuary city, or have in the recent past. What are they going to do when they run out of that money?
Thank you, sir. So I'll give a grace minute.
Sorry.
And then I'll gavel again. I'm just going to keep gaveling, so. Okay.
You can gavel him too.
Yeah, I plan on it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to talk
Name and
about
address,
Gavel.
please.
So I'm Joe McCoy, 11 Clapp Street, City Council President. Let me start off by first thanking the committee. I think you've done an outstanding job of thoroughness. You make the council proud. Thank you for the audience. This is, as Tamara mentioned, democracy. There have been so many people out there who have been intimately involved in this, and your work and passion are really appreciated. There was one little part of information that has been omitted, which I think is important. Everything Tamara said is very important and about maybe why we would want to withdraw this at the time. But I did finally get today an opinion from our city solicitor saying that passing an ordinance where we would be instructing the police department how to behave is outside our purview. We do not have the jurisdiction to do that. This is the exact same thing that happened in Northampton. Their procedure was they were going to pass an ordinance. They found out they didn't have the authority to do it, and then their mayor passed an executive order. So that is also a very important part of why this may not. We do not have the power, according to our city solicitor, to create an ordinance that would instruct a department how their policy. The mayor does, chief of police does. I also like to say that I think it is oftentimes overlooked how important community policing is to our police department. People say, well, the chief could change or the behavior could change. Well, because words are just words. Well, they are, but look at the action. We have never, ever deported someone unless they were criminally involved. So there is not a history of this ever happening in East Hampton. And I believe our department and our chief of police sincerely believes of not following any kind of rounding up people. They are community-based people. They want to be your friends. They are only involved in upholding the law. And I believe that I trust them. But let's say there are skeptics around us. Let's say, but what if? Well, what if, it would just take one pen stroke by the mayor to create an executive order that could change something. So instead of going through the months of this, if the situation ever arose in East Hampton where we felt that, yes, things are happening that we don't like, the mayor could, with an executive order, change that. But the reality is that doesn't happen here. That does not happen here. And our police, I believe them and I trust them and I know their heart and where they're looking to. But if it happened, there would be a recourse that could be done instantaneously. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say again, to inform everybody about the legal aspect of this, and to everyone, thank you for your participation.
Thanks, Joe. 30 seconds to spare.
I endeavor to be that concise.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Kate Collins. I'm at 4 Carroll Ave in East Hampton. First, a brief question, if you don't mind. We are wondering if this will be withdrawn without prejudice.
I believe that is...
Wonderful, thank you. First of all, I just want to thank Councilor Smith for her words. I feel like they were very difficult and necessary and very heartfelt. And I think that the council and also the town may be wondering if people that have been working towards some kind of ordinance are going to take this as a final word and step back. To address what Councilor Smith said about starting things from the ground and working up, just so that you're aware, we do have a group that is doing community organizing. We have learned a lot about local politics in the past few months. We want to be strategic about how we accomplish goals for our community. And after feeling our way through the first part of this process, we think it makes the most sense to table this part of the discussion right now and make sure our community leaders are on board with anything that we bring forward perhaps in the future. We would like to also answer our neighbors' questions, and we want to do that effectively. So we are going to continue to organize. We want to put community support in place for anybody who feels threatened by things that are happening in our country right now. We want to make sure that that support is there and programs are in place, and that is driven by members of our community. One of the most amazing things about this entire situation is that I have met amazing people that are East Hampton residents, people that are willing to put their heart and their time and their energy into making sure the vulnerable people in this community are protected. And if nothing else comes from this in the future, that is absolutely invaluable, and I'm very proud to know each and every one of you. So, we are continuing to organize, and if you would like to be involved in the effort to make East Hampton safe for everyone, please come and see me. I'm sorry, that goes for you too, because you are all East Hampton residents, and we would welcome your feedback and your energy. Please come and see myself after the meeting if you want to be involved or if you just want more information, and we're happy to get you involved. There is a lot of wonderful energy in this town and a lot of people who do not want a town that is based on hatred and divisiveness. And anybody on any side of the issue, if you want to talk to me or to anybody in my group that's been working for this, please come and talk to me, because I want to hear from every side of the issue. And I think that that goes for the council too. And they've been taking a lot of feedback. And so I just want to thank everybody that's been taking part of this process for teaching me a lot about this. And again, Councilor Smith, thank you very much for your time and your words.
Thank you.
Is it okay if I ask I just would like to ask a question of the police chief? Okay.
If it's okay with you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is that all right? Hi. I was here at the last meeting, and I did hear what your policies, and I really appreciate how you're approaching this matter of immigration. But I just wanted to ask, in lieu of the new executive orders and the immigration policy coming out, and that they're talking about the 287G program to encourage trained law enforcement to act as immigration police. I'm not quite certain on it, but can you speak to that? And just, I guess I'm hoping to just be reaffirmed of your commitment to not cave under the pressure, or find out if there are ways that they can actually force you to comply with what they'd like.
One second before you go, can you just state your name
Sure.
and address for the record?
Lisa
So,
Berkovitz, 74 Ferry Street.
Chief, if you're okay.
Good evening, Bob Alberti, Police Chief of East Hampton. Anybody that knows me knows I don't cave to much. Ask my officers. What I can refer to with regard to assigning task force officers voluntarily under the statute that she's referring, it's a voluntary program where we would assign a task force officer to a particular federal agency. So, by way of historic example, I was assigned under the same statute to the DEA for the better part of 10 years as a task force officer. I will tell you that that partnership resulted in a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash directly back to the police department to be used pretty much at there's certain guidelines to it, but to help our department not have to come before City Council and look for additional funding, or helps our budget for sure. Currently, under the same statute, I'm assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force in Springfield, the FBI's Task Force on Terrorism. That's paid huge dividends in a multitude of ways, to include this past weekend's bombing arrest. In addition to that, we work the DEA, we work with them all the time. ATF and the FBI have been camped out in my police station for almost two solid weeks, working on this investigation. I'm sure most of you have read in the paper and are part and parcel to most of it. There's much more coming. But without those partnerships, we wouldn't be able to do a lot of the great safety and security and procedural stuff, to include the resources that the government can bring to bear. We do not have a task force officer in immigration or in ICE or in DHS. We never, in my career, and I'll go back to the guys that have been on a lot longer than me, in our career, and I've said this before, we've never had one instance in East Hampton where we've had DHS, they all fall under DHS, come into East Hampton on a civil detainer and ask us to detain anybody. If they did that today, I would tell them, sorry, I can't help you. I don't have the resources for it. I'm doing criminal investigations. I'm keeping the people here in East Hampton safe and secure. Every human being in East Hampton safe and secure. I don't care what walk of life you come from. I said before, I don't care what planet you're from, because it doesn't matter. So to that end, I'm not going to assign anybody to a federal task force currently, because there's no necessity here. I'm still assigned to the JTTF, but that's more of an advisory role now, especially as a police chief. If I could assign it, I don't have the bodies to assign anybody anywhere. I barely have the bodies to put on the street to protect you folk. So I don't have the resources to assign anybody anywhere. But if I were to do that, my first choice would be back with our partners at DEA, because assigning somebody to DEA does some amazing things for East Hampton Police and for the city of East Hampton by way of revenue back to the police department. In addition to the fact that it's basically we have our own narcotics task force, because I don't have the resources to have a narcotics task force here in East Hampton. And I will tell you, with the opioid crisis, we're in trouble from a narcotics standpoint. So I have to put my resources, I have to prioritize my resources, or lack of resources for that matter, to what's impacting this community, what's impacting the safety and security of this community as a whole. There's a drug epidemic. When I was with DEA, we did some international cases that a couple of them came right through East Hampton from the Mexican border. We did work with immigration at that time, but those were criminal investigations. These folks are in federal prison, and when they get out of federal prison, they'll be facing deportation. Not a civil detainer, has nothing to do with immigration status, civil immigration status. So that's the long answer. I'm sure I'm well over my 3 minutes, but that's the long answer to. I'm not assigning anybody to any federal task force, and if I were, immigration is at the very bottom of the list, right before. Actually, they'd still probably be right after. I don't know. Pick another federal agency. Yeah, of course.
So, if there was an incentive, financial incentive for you to put someone on the immigration force, would you? No, absolutely not. And the short of it there is, DEA doesn't just bring the financial resources back. It's sharing of forfeitures. So ICE would have to, immigration or DHS would have to say, hey, Chief, I'm going to give you 10 police officers to help us. And I'm like, we're still not doing it, because I actually need 10 police officers to help protect you folk on a day-to-day basis, never mind civil immigration, which, oh, by the way, probably the most poignant thing is civil immigration is a federal matter. It's not a local police matter. And the federal government can't jam, and it's a states' rights issue anyway. The federal government can't go in and say we're mandating you, the police department of a local city, to do anything. That's why it's very specific, written into that law, that it's voluntary. You're welcome.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
My name's Eli Damon, 14 Ward Avenue. I just have a quick, slightly off-topic comment about our dependence on federal funding. I don't know exactly, I admit, how dependent we are on federal funding, but assuming that we are highly dependent, I think maybe we should be a little uneasy about that, because there's any number of ways that we could lose it or be put in a dilemma where we have to decide whether, where we have to choose between two bad options, giving up the money or something else. And maybe as a community we should think of whether we want to, whether there's a way we can make ourselves less vulnerable to that and less dependent on this federal funding. I mean, I'm not saying we should say, go away, we don't want the money, but like, if there's a way we could arrange our finances so that it's just like a bonus and not something that we couldn't do without.
Thank you.
I'm Janice Doppler, and I'm from 120 Lovefield Street. Every November, we all celebrate Thanksgiving. And the story that we learned as children is that a bunch of immigrants came to Cape Cod, and they were met by people who already lived here. And without the people who protected and fed and helped and taught the immigrants, those immigrants would have died there are a lot of people in East Hampton and all around the country who are very afraid today. And if we're going to live by the values that we celebrate every Thanksgiving, we have to find a way to protect the people who are afraid. Certain people are afraid today. It could be any of us tomorrow.
Hi, my name's Jeff Sealander, lifelong resident of East Hampton. I currently live on Caroline Circle. My name's Jeff Sealander. I'm a lifelong resident of East Hampton, and I currently live on Caroline Circle. Tip O'Neill has been quoted as saying, "All politics is local." This is a very local political discussion, but it's been prompted by the fact that our federal government is not doing their job. We have not had comprehensive legislative immigration reform in this country for over 30 years. Our Constitution calls for the legislative branch of government to make laws, not the executive branch through executive orders. One of the things that we must do is we must demand that our elected legislators do their job. My fear is that their inaction is beginning to divide and conquer. It's an age-old tactic. Washington tells us that they want to bring our country together, but their failure to act on these vital issues is tearing us apart. As citizens, we all deserve better. As was mentioned, we don't even have a definition for what a sanctuary city is. That said, here we are. We like our politics to be simple. We like to be able to fit them on a bumper sticker. Better to be dead than red. Question authority. Save the whales. One could speculate that a bumper sticker for this administration might read, "Question intelligence." But politics is not simple. It's often scary. I was 11 years old during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And for all the bravado in politics, all I really wanted to be was 12. I personally don't want any 11-year-olds to worry that their parents may be taken away. No one I've spoken to wants to protect criminals. But if we react out of fear without considering the full impact, we will likely find ourselves on the wrong side of history. This has happened too many times before, locally and nationally and globally. Short-sighted solutions have often led to further long-term problems. I fully support the council and the local police for their fairness, the dialogue, and the opportunity to move forward. I want to end my thoughts with another bumper sticker. And I understand that this one is very personal, so I don't mean to offend anyone. What would Jesus do? Thank you.
Hey there, J. Andrew World on Pleasant Street.
Once again.
One more time, please. Sorry, we didn't catch your name.
J. Andrew World.
Can you spell that?
Like the planet.
J?
Yeah. J, letter J. Andrew World like the planet.
Thank you. Yeah,
Everybody get that?
Got it.
Thank you.
All right.
I didn't penalize your time.
No problem. All right. Just really quickly, apparently I get a lot of reporting on the ground like sent to me. I can't even explain what's going on lately, but that's a whole other story. But I've been hearing that there's been actual ICE raids that's been going on across the country. There was a big one in LA that was talked about on Twitter. I've not heard about anything followed up on that, so I'm going to leave that as a rumor. A good friend of mine who lives way in upstate New York, where that flat part where nobody ever goes, there was apparently major ICE raids happening there too. And so it's not like we're talking about just big cities, and the fact that they're going door to door, looking for people actually is a big concern. And I understand our question, and I know the police chief has answered actually a lot of my initial concern about it. But I just want to leave it with this question, and I don't expect an answer right now. But is there a way, as a community, we can actually prevent that kind of police state coming to East Hampton?
Howdy, Chris Mastriani, 48 Parsons Street. I also have just a general question. From what I've been looking up, sanctuary cities, Massachusetts, California, New York City, or New York, and the majority of sanctuary cities are in blue states, and these states receive back less from the federal government than we put in. I don't know if I kind of feel like the cards are in our favor if we keep the status quo as opposed to breaking one city at a time, because then they will be able to hold us. Then they will have the more leverage. So that's my thought. Not really a question.
Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to? Oh, looks like we.
Were we discussing the campus things tonight too, or is that not on? I wasn't sure. I thought that maybe.
Hi, I'm Tom Fern. I live on Brook Street. My grandparents came here. They were immigrants. The only difference is they loved this country and they came here legally. And that's the big difference here that we're talking about. I grew up in East Hampton, and I moved out of East Hampton when I was in my 30s. And I figured I'm going to move back here because I loved this town so much when I was growing up. And I can't believe this is going on. It's just, I feel really strongly about this. I also was around during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I was on a boarding party. And it's just, I don't know what to say, but I'm not much of a speaker, but I'll tell you, I commend you for withdrawing that proposal. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tristan Chambers. That's Tristan Chambers. I live on Clark Street. I have two clarifying questions. Oh, but first I wanted to thank you guys for this harrowing experience. It's been a good time. Thank you for your diligence and patience. I'm babbling to myself, so sorry.
There are seats up front.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to come sit, there are seats.
But I just wanted to thank you, and I also want to say that I respect your decision to withdraw this without prejudice. I think that it is a difficult but wise decision. I support the spirit of the measure, but I think that it's the right choice for where we're at as a town. And I thank you for that. So I wanted to ask, first of all, who was it? The chair of city council delivered a message saying that the city solicitor says that you don't have the jurisdiction. I was wondering if that is like in writing, because my understanding was that it was not that. So I just want to make sure that that gets sort of recorded in sort of the public record, so that it can be clarified and maybe verified afterwards, if that would be too much to ask.
Those decisions are public. If
Okay.
there is an opinion, I understand, that is in writing. I have
Great.
not seen that
Okay,
opinion.
so it is in
That's-
writing
That
in the
then
public
becomes
record.
part of the public record, and the city clerk generally is the one who takes control of all public documents.
Great,
She
thank
would
you.
be the
So
one to talk
it
to.
will be in the public record.
Oh,
yeah.
It was verbal at this meeting, so I just wanted to clarify that. That's all.
And to be clear, we personally have not received that yet.
Okay. You haven't seen it in writing, but...
Oh, okay.
Okay,
So I
great.
guess apparently it's in our email.
Wonderful. So that answers my question. Thank you.
Yep.
I have a soda.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Hi everybody, my name is Jacob Speaks. I live at 144 Main Street here in East Hampton. I just have a couple of thoughts. I mean, you know, one is what the mayor of Somerville said, which is that the concern about having federal funds withdrawn is it probably shouldn't be as grand as it is, because we have laws and the president is not a king. The next thing that I would like to say is that at the last meeting there was mention of protection through U-Visa. U-Visa, as I have learned from members of the State Department with whom I have spoken, are incredibly limited, completely subjective, have to do with serious crimes, have to do with crimes that are that initially had to do with crimes that are part of human trafficking or crimes against women. They have nothing to do with any kind of misdemeanor that you can think of. They don't have to do with someone smashing your window. The ability to report those things, therefore, would be severely curtailed and would put people under threat. The other thing about a U-Visa is that there is no guarantee. At any point along the way, your helpfulness, which is a completely subjective matter, can be deemed inadequate, and your path to U-Visa, which is a temporary visa anyway, will be taken away. So the idea that we have protections in place now is just simply not true. The next thing that I would like to say, and I guess the last thing that I would like to say, is I know people who live in communities in which they do not have policies and in which they have actually been coerced or incentivized to cooperate with ICE. I have a friend who lives in Arizona, where her children know that when their father takes them to school, they have to leave early because he will be stopped more often than not. And when their mother, who is white, takes them to school, they can leave right on time. The last thing that I would like to say is that my grandmother, who is 97, had the opportunity to read to children at the same school she attended nearly 9 decades earlier in Birmingham, Alabama. And she was the child of immigrants, Russian immigrants, who fled during the pogroms. And most of the kids that she had were also the children of immigrants, in this case, people who were primarily from Latin America. When the policies of Birmingham, Alabama changed, even though the policies did not require that the school system turn over information, it created such a freezing effect that people no longer sent their kids to school, did not send natural-born citizen children to school, perhaps because, thank you, one or more of the parents was undocumented. So my grandmother no longer reads to those children because there are no children left to read to. None of them come anymore. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Okay. It seems as though we don't have any more comments. So, that being said, I think at this time we could... there we go.
My name's Donald Torrey, and I'm opposed to the sanctuary city designation.
Address?
Address, please, sir.
17 School Street. And nobody seems to be able to tell me how many undocumented aliens are in East Hampton. Any idea? Are we doing this for invisible people? If there are any, are they being taken care of? Is it human trafficking? Are they working in restaurants and put up in lawnmower sheds? Or, you know, there's no answers to any of these. It seems like everybody is more concerned with what the president is doing. I just don't see any undocumented aliens. You know, the only ones I know of are 3 that are in jail, right? Now, if an undocumented alien is stopped for driving and he has no license, what happens?
Louder, please.
You asking me? Are you asking me?
Yeah.
If anyone is driving without a license, they're going to be criminally charged.
Are they going to be deported?
That's not for me to decide.
Are you going to hold them?
I don't hold prisoners.
So they would just be let go?
No, they'll be brought to court.
And the court would say
Whatever the court does.
So they could hold them, or whatever.
Whatever the court does.
Okay, thank you. So anyways, that's my only, I hate to see the city lose funds. Nobody knows how many people are here. That's all I have to say.
My name is Chris Thompson and I live on Union Street. I don't understand a lot of this, of what's going on, but my question is this. These people that are coming in, my understanding is they're being backed by a Catholic group of people? No.
I think you might be mixing this up with refugees.
Yeah.
That is not the issue that we're talking about.
This isn't that issue?
This is not.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
That's fine.
No, I think that really highlights the need to have open discussions. I think
Right.
it's important.
Hi, my name's Andrea Stone from Crescent Street in East Hampton. I'm a first generation in terms of born in my family, and I suspect there's a lot of people here who it's not many generations back that came to this country. My father was able to come here legally because of the circumstances in the world. He had to leave his country because it was Germany. He was Jewish. It was 1933. And that's how come I'm a lifelong citizen of the United States. I think someone talked about our federal government. If we had different immigration policy, that might make a difference. But for now, it's the right thing to do. People are dying and starving and don't have other options. And once they get here, even though they're illegal to begin with, they can apply and become legal as if that is a person. So I think it's the right thing to do, and I really hope East Hampton and Massachusetts will lead the way.
Hi, my name's Ann Holstein, 32 Mutter Street. On top of that last comment, it's the right thing to do. I would like to ask, because I believe it is the right thing to do, if this motion is now taken off the table, what happens now? This is just dropped. Could you explain to people?
So, do you want to take it?
Well, I'm happy to try to answer that. We will then report to the city council that if the motion is taken off the table, it's been taken off our table, we're recommending that the council take it off. And then that's up to the council to decide with the 9 members of the council. If they do, it's temporarily or permanently off the table until someone re-raises the issue.
But
if it's passed without prejudice.
As a subcommittee, does the council usually listen to recommendation?
Depends.
Depends.
Okay.
As
Okay.
precedent, usually.
So it sounds like let's just say, if they do accept to remove this, nothing is going to be done. Is that my understanding? I just want you to answer. Nothing will be done to do what's right.
As far as an ordinance goes,
Yes.
That does not mean that something else could not be presented. Either a resolution would be the other option for the city council, or if the mayor decided to do something, then that would be another option as well.
So
this does not necessarily mean that nothing will be done. It just means that the
resolution
ordinance
from city council or the mayor.
or the
which
mayor.
should-
And
okay.
the mayor would be an executive order.
You know, the one caution with a resolution is that a resolution has no legal power behind it. So as a city council, to pass a resolution would be really saying more of our moral stance towards the issue, but not have any law. And I think that comes back to the issue of who are we stating it for. One of my biggest concerns, and I would really want to consider this if we do move this to the resolution, and that would take place at the full council level, is whether or not that would be giving people who do not live in East Hampton, who may be trying to map out where within the state is a sanctuary city, would not want a resolution saying that we believe in a sanctuary city to be mistaken for a legal sanctuary city, from the responsibility standpoint of putting people at risk of thinking that they are in a sanctuary zone if they are not. And that's one of the concerns I have about a resolution. Not saying that that completely takes a resolution off the table, but I do think we need to hear more from the advocacy community about what those risks or dangers would be before we move quickly to appease the overall hopes of people within the city of East Hampton, that they want the city to reflect that. I think there's two different levels of wanting the city to reflect those values and actually having that as a law versus a statement. And in a resolution, it would only be that statement of values.
Okay, but for all intents and purposes, it sounds to me as if this is over.
I think at this point for the city council, we really don't have many directions we can go with the wording of sanctuary cities as it is, and not having the power. I haven't seen the writing from the solicitor yet, but being told that we don't have the power to have a sanctuary city ordinance that stems from the city council. The city council, I think this is where our movement ends at this point.
Okay, so our democratic process part is over.
But our citizen process,
I just want that
our
to be
citizen
clear.
process is not over.
I'm talking about our city democratic process. I think you all should clearly state that, and state that for the news person who's here, that it has ended. That's what you're telling me.
We can make a recommendation tonight if we choose to do so, and that'll go before the council, yes.
But that doesn't, so procedurally, I think it's important to note that if it was found that the city attorney's opinion, which I still haven't seen yet, was in question, and there was a group that wanted to put together some sort of ordinance that could address this issue, there's nothing from keeping anybody from addressing this in the future.
No, I'm just talking about for now and what has gone on thus far.
That would be correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very clear.
Hi, my name is Marge Prendergast. I live at 2 Gough Street. Tamara, I want to thank you for looking at both sides of the situation. I thank the council for doing its due diligence. I thank you for checking in and finding out legally what we can do. I appreciate what the police department does. I'd like to say out loud that I think the process has been amazing. And yes, we are on 2 different sides, but I don't think we're really on 2 different sides. I think we're given an opportunity now to make this a stronger movement as opposed to a divided movement. I don't want my neighbors angry at me. I want to better understand the other side, and I know they want to understand my side. But if we truly want to protect each community member, it's got to come from the ground up. I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to be told how to behave. But I do want to make sure that my children and my grandchildren, yeah, I got a grandchild now, my grandchildren are allowed to learn and grow together with their neighbors. I think this is a massively wonderful opportunity that has had a lot of conversation. I'm proud of each and every one of you for standing up here, saying your piece, and making the movement. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not their job anymore, it's ours. So I say we step up to the plate and stop talking about it. And I thank you again.
Am I allowed to talk again? Thanks, sorry. I was very quick last time. So I want to clarify for myself and everyone here about sort of where we stand, where we are in kind of the maze of city government and process, so that everybody's on the same page about that, and I am too. So we are in an ordinance subcommittee meeting. What you are doing is you are charged with developing language for an ordinance to bring back to the city council, which would consider that ordinance. That ordinance would be a law, which would be binding, and it would direct the police department to do certain things. Now, as you just mentioned, the city council also has the capacity to pass what is called a resolution, which is a statement of sort of value or opinion that's official by the city. And you have chosen not to do that because of the political climate and... Okay, sorry. But I shouldn't say you. I should say, so far that has not been proposed. Is that correct? That's correct. A resolution has not been proposed. Okay. And then outside of your purview, there is also another legal mechanism, which is an executive order from our mayor, which would also be legally binding. Is that correct? Correct. Yeah. And also I'd like to mention that right now we also have policies within our police department which are in line more or less with the proposal that was put on the table as an ordinance. It's just that we wanted to take that a step further and see, could we make that law? Instead, right now it's an internal policy, but we were saying, well, could we sort of codify that, put it in writing so that it's fixed and wouldn't change if sentiment changed, or there were more carrots placed in front of us as a city, and we said, oh well, we could have $3 more million, and then if we just did this program, something like that. So I just want to sort of reiterate where we are in this sort of policy maze, and I want to point out that as Tamara and others have said, there's a lot of opportunity if you are interested in this issue for local organizing. And bringing this from the bottom up so that we as a city are behind this, and it's a more genuine and forceful effort that we're all on board with.
I'll be incredibly brief. I just had a quick question for the chief. According to the sorry to put you on the spot. According to the 2014 resolution to support the executive policy order for police procedures in Northampton, they directed the Northampton Police Department personnel to allow motor vehicle operators stopped for a violation and to be found unlicensed a reasonable opportunity to arrange for a properly licensed operator to drive the vehicle regardless of immigration status. So pretty much they get pulled over, according to this, in Northampton, and they don't have a license regardless of me, you, anybody, or illegal. They just let them go on their way. Do you feel at any point that you may be under undue pressure from the mayor if he passes an executive order?
No, my question back to you is, so why do we all have licenses?
I don't know. I didn't file this policy. I don't.
You're in East Hampton.
Yeah, good. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Okay, going once. Going twice.
I won't talk. I know. No, I promise. No, I promise. Very, very quick. Just for information, because I know this has come up a lot, I will ask the city clerk to post the city solicitor letter on our website front page tomorrow.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Appreciate that. So, is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak on this issue? Okay, none being seen, I would be willing to entertain a motion.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to withdraw without prejudice the proposal to create an ordinance regarding sanctuary city status.
Okay.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. JP. I can really speak.
No, if you don't mind.
Oh, no, please. Please.
A couple of things troubled me about the ordinance and the proposal, the way it came about, and what it meant. And I was struggling with that. And to say that we're a sanctuary city may mislead people into thinking that they're safe in our communities and within our borders. And I'm not sure that's the case. I'm not sure that ICE wouldn't just sweep in if they wanted to enforce federal law, and they could, and it really is a misnomer. I heard the possibility of calling this a safe community or a trust ordinance. I'm not sure that it's really safer or that much trusting. So I really had problems with naming this something that really codified the practices that I think we all hope for in our community, and that is that our police do the job of enforcing the laws that are local, state, and federal with regard to criminals, and that immigration policy be enforced by those federal agents that enforce immigration policy. Also, I did learn, I'm second generation American. My grandparents, at least one set of them came to East Hampton, one to Northampton, and it was way back when, and I heard many people on both sides of this issue, and I listened very carefully to everyone. But on the side of the issue that said, you know, my grandparents came here and they did things the legal way, and they became naturalized, and that is very true in many cases, except when you look back at the immigration policies that were in place in the just before 1910, from 1910 to 1920, there were no quotas that I could find that limited how many people could come to the United States from particular areas. So I think it was a little easier for our grandparents to leave where they were coming from, if you happen to be of that generation, and to settle here and become naturalized and do things legally. That's just one example. If you listen to everyone in the arguments that are made and the positions, and we listen carefully to one another, I think we have a lot to learn and a lot to share. So I am very appreciative of the experience and for all the emails and calls I got, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, JP. I'm sorry, we actually have a motion on the table, and when a motion...
You're in public speak time.
Not anymore.
When we went to a motion, we're no longer...
Business consideration should be there.
Once a motion's on the table, then the public discussion is over. I'm sorry.
Can we hear the motion again, please? Because I could barely...
Could you hear it? It was to remove the agenda item without prejudice.
I have.
Could you read the agenda? I mean, I want to know the wording. All of the wording.
You know,
I
guess I had a question first of all. Someone would like to say something, and I know we've tried very hard to have an open process. I would suggest that we withdraw the second and withdraw the first, and then open it up if there's something you'd like to say. That's my suggestion. I move to withdraw the second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So if you do have...
can we say 5 minutes, 6 minutes or something?
A couple minutes.
If there's something you'd like to say. Would you like...
I'm not asking for more public speak time. I'm asking for the procedure on your agenda. You have public speak time, you go to new business, you go to continuing business. Under continuing business, you have the consideration of a sanctuary city designation. I think that's the point in time on the agenda where withdrawing the motion
or deciding what you're going to do with the proposal or not the proposal for an ordinance should fall.
And
I think we're there.
That's
I
where
think
we're
I
at.
think we're there.
Yep.
I thought that's where we were.
Okay.
Did you discuss?
No, well, it's within our, discretion to move around on the agenda, and we might not even get to some agenda items.
Is there anyone else who has anything? Thank you.
Okay, so
Then we get to repeat the motion and you get to hear it again.
that's right.
Are you asking the wording of the original proposal?
I'm asking to hear, I hope it wasn't too long a proposal, but I'd like to hear it.
I don't have it on me right
Um,
here. JP, can you pull up the original proposal?
I mean, it's very simple. It is request to consider consideration of sanctuary city designation. So consideration of sanctuary city designation. So the motion would be a motion to remove the request to consider sanctuary city designation. Without prejudice. And that was it. Yeah. So, do you want to restate that motion? Or do you want to read it?
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to withdraw without prejudice the consideration of a sanctuary city designation.
Second.
Okay. So, we're at discussion still. So JP, thank you. Tamara, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I did. I was hoping that the police chief could speak to the notion of a lot of community signs being stolen in the wake of this whole debate, and can't speak to it.
Well, I can, it's not material.
Well, we have a motion on the
We have
table.
a
still.
motion on the
I'm
floor.
sorry.
Motion on the floor.
Sorry.
Okay. So is there anything else that doesn't involve input? Okay. So I did want to speak to this, and I think this is important for me to say because, at the last meeting I was told that I wasn't allowed to have an opinion, and I vehemently disagree with that. And I did approach this with an open mind as best I could. And, I think for me, this issue is a personal issue because I have experience with quite a few children that are immigrants as a teacher. And, and it comes from, I think a little bit of this comes from my background. My grandmother was a Wampanoag Indian, and she raised my dad. And so I always had a perspective of, being an indigenous person and having the Wampanoag Indians be the people that were greeting the pilgrims. It kind of makes you have a different view on immigration. And for me, I raised my kids in East Hampton, and I have 3 children that have gone through East Hampton schools, and they've had an amazing time here in diverse schools with diverse populations. And I coach basketball. It's one of my other things I do besides being on city council. And my players that are East Hampton players playing right now in Palmer, that's why I'm wearing maroon tonight, because, and my players were immigrants. I had a Cambodian player who's amazing, by the way. And, some people may be like, oh, well, why don't you step up to the plate and if you're going to support immigrants, then maybe you should do something. Well, I had a Moroccan player. I had a Cambodian player. I have a player right now who's from Senegal. And I feed my players. I take them places. I support them. I love them like they're my kids. And I think that's the important thing to realize is that we're talking about people. I have a student right now who is from El Salvador, and he rode a train to get here by himself. He's 15 years old. And the reason his parents put him on a train to get here by himself was because it wasn't safe for him to be there. And he has an uncle here who he's staying with. He works 7 days a week to pay for an immigration lawyer. And if you're telling me that when I go into my class and I look at him and I have to treat him differently because he's illegal, no way. That's a human child who deserves to be respected and loved, and I think that's the part that we're missing here. And I know, and When I remember, I heard that when the petition came forward, the person said, who are illegal aliens? I've never met one. Well, they are purposefully not out in plain sight because they're and they contribute to our society. They earn paychecks and they pay taxes. And so, for me, this was hard because I see the human piece of this every day. And if you can't appreciate that, I'm sorry. But, I think that from my perspective, I'm in support of taking this off the agenda. But I also am in support of taking a stand as a council and looking at a resolution. And so, I'm gonna push for that, and I'm hoping that the other councilors will appreciate it. And that's all I have to say. So, any other further discussion? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? No, because we all voted yes. So, so that concludes this portion of the meeting. And in fact, I would actually be willing to hear a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Before we adjourn,
Oh.
may I ask the police chief about the sign, or is it too late?
Can we just, I don't care.
I can talk to him after.
Okay. All right. So we do have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for coming, everybody. We appreciate you. Appreciate you. Thank you.
I just wanted to apologize if I caused you guys any